Hello, Frizzle Factorial. I am happy to announce that I have done the math and my favorite genre is sci-fi romance. In my last 2 years of reading, here is the star distributions of my Sci-fromance books. And guys, it's looking real good. 43% of these books are 5 stars, which means every 2 to 3 Sci-fromance books I read, one of them should be 5 stars. So I think it's about time to put it to the test. So this video will not end until I find a 5-star Sci-fromance. And a sci-fromance novel is one where both the sci-fi-ness and the romance-ness is integral to what the novel is. I'm not talking about like romance books where one of the characters is an engineer, and I'm not talking about sci-fi books with like the tiniest romance subplot. I'm trying to find a full melding of these two genres. And now's the time for you to make your guesses in the comments. How many books do you think it'll take me? No cheating, okay? Let's get rolling with book 1. And that was Scarlet. So this is the second in the series. I read the first book like years and years ago, so long ago. The only thing I remember about it is that it's Cyborg Cinderella. So I decided might as well just skip to this next one and let's see how that is. So what do you want to know about first? The romance plot or the sci-fi plot? Let's start out with the romance. So this is a Little Red Riding Hood sci-fi retelling, kind of. Our main character is Scarlet. She works on a farm in the future where they have spaceships to get around and she's pretty good at flying those. She also has quite a temper. And then our love interest is Wolf, a street fighter that has some quite rough around the edges characteristics. And what did I think of their romance? I definitely did ship them. I thought their ferocity paired really nicely, where they both were really like quick to anger, but not in ways that made them incredibly unlikable. They're very passionate people, let's put it like that. However, I really don't think they had enough scenes together to make a great romance. Like, they knew each other over the course of like a day or two, and then they're together by the end of the book. And they really didn't have that many interactions of getting to know each other. And part of that is because of the sci-fi plot. So I wasn't quite expecting this, but this book ties in heavily with book 1, which, again, I don't remember anything about. But in that book, you have Cyborg Cinderella, and she gets involved in this like interstellar war between the people of Earth and the people of the Moon. And the people of the Moon are mad because they have this lost princess they're trying to get back, and she gets caught up in that. I assume it's all going to tie together with all these fairy tale retellings. And honestly, about half of the plot of this book, Scarlet, was continuing on Cinder's plotline, which was very interesting. And I did enjoy it. But it did make this book feel very much like it had too much plot. We had Scarlet's plot of her starting to get involved in this interstellar war, along with Wolf, and Cinder's plot of her already involved and breaking out of prison and trying to make progress and getting angry at all of these setbacks that she's encountering. So with all of that jam-packed plot, there just wasn't enough to really develop a romance. It was just like Scarlet and Wolf meet. They have some bantery moments. They go on a little adventure together. Maybe they talk about their feelings once. Okay, now they're together. They're a couple. Great. Of the sci-fi and the romance plot lines, I liked the sci-fi plot better. It was very engaging, and I am excited to continue the series for that reason. But I'm not exactly excited to continue the series because of the romance, you know? So, if we were putting books on a scale of over here are romance books with a sci-fi setting, and over here are sci-fi books with a small romance subplot. So this is the spectrum of sci-fromance. Where would this one land? And I'm gonna say it's like here. The romance is definitely an important side plot, but it's still a side plot. Oh, and I gave Scarlet 3 stars. I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I do think I'm going to cycle back and reread Cinder and then continue on in the series probably. So I'm about halfway through into Fortune's Pawn, and I want to tell you about the sci-fi and the romance. Let's start with the sci-fi. So our main character is Debbie, and she is very gung-ho space marine type character. She comes from a really interesting galactic empire culture that worships its king. And she is like really religious, so she's really passionate about worshiping the king, and her whole drive and goal in life is to become one of the king's elite guards. So in order for her to be recruited into the king's guard, she has to have a pretty stellar resume. So she's going around the galaxy getting jobs as a fighter in a mech suit. And she's gotten this job where she is the protection for a trading spaceship. And this spaceship has the reputation that it's always getting into trouble and all the guards are always dying. So she thinks, if I survive this, it's gonna look really good on my record. And the sci-fi plot I feel like is incredibly strong. I love how it's really delving into Devi's culture, especially as she comes into contact with other people on this spaceship who have a lot of different cultures than her and kind of question or like, oh, you're that weird one that worships the king? So there's a lot of good inter-party conflict brewing. There's also kind of the looming mystery of like, why does this spaceship have so many enemies trying to hunt it down? And there's gotta be more than just them trading fish across the galaxy, you know? Now, there's also something that I'm not super loving about this book, and that's the audiobook. So I think I might switch to try to find an ebook version from my library instead of the audiobook version, because the audiobook is just, oh, it's so bad. So the narrator is trying to give everyone like a fun accent, but they're really bad at it. It's kind of ridiculous because you could just make up literally any accent for anyone. It's all just like different space races. Every time I hear any character speak in this book, my immediate reaction is always like, that's not how people sound. I can't put my finger on exactly why it's so bad, but it's so bad. And also the tone that the narrator gives to all the characters is also super annoying. Like every single character, whenever they speak, sounds like the most bratty, rude person, including our narrator just as she's talking to the reader, and it kind of is making me hate every single character in this book. That's how I'm feeling about the sci-fi plot. I think in abstract, it sounds like a really interesting plot. And I think it's really well crafted that we have a narrator with a really strong goal in mind and a really bursting off the page personality, and also these juicy sources of inter-party conflict here. But also, I'm hating like every chapter of this book because I think of the audiobook. So I'm gonna switch to the ebook and see if that fixes much. Okay, so now let's talk about the romance. And so far, there hasn't been much romance, which is disappointing because that's why I picked up this book. I mean, it is like a trilogy, so maybe there's more romance in the later books. So right now, there are kind of like 3 viable, maybe love interests on this spaceship. The one that's had most flirting between our main character, Devi, is the cook. Devi is sensing that there's more to him, that it seems like he might have been a warrior. Like, it seems like he really knows how to handle weapons and himself in a fight. So Devi and me, I'm really curious about this. However, I mean, this might just be connected to me hating every single character right now, but he's so annoying and I do not want him as a love interest, mostly because he's like consistently lying to Devi and manipulating her. Where for like the beginning of the book, he was like being really flirty and always giving Devi a bunch of drinks, not quite taking advantage of her when she's drunk, but also not doing that. And then it was revealed that his motive for flirting with Devi and really trying to form this bond with her was like in order to trick her. I kind of hate him, and it just feels super icky because I don't know how much of their relationship is real flirting and how much of it is just he was manipulating her in order to get what he wanted. Because lying about your dark past is one thing, manipulating them, that's an entire other bucket that I feel like disqualifies you from being a good love interest. I really loved the premise, but so far it's not looking good. Because the very small amount of romance that is brewing, I really don't ship, and also I'm hating all the characters right now. But I'm telling you right now, it's not looking like this one's gonna be the 5-star.
Hello, I'm about to do some dishes, and I also want to talk to you about finishing Fortune's Pawn. I switched from the audiobook, hopes that it was just the audiobook narrator that was driving me crazy, and I do think the audiobook narrator was part of it, because I did like reading it better than listening to it, by quite a bit. I no longer had a burning hatred for every single character every single time they said anything. I still didn't really like it enough to continue. I read quite a few chapters out of the ebook until I got to like, I forget the number, 60%, and then actually gave up on the book. Officially, completely done. And I think mostly this was a combination of a few things. One, I still hated the love interest, so whenever there was romance scenes, which there were quite a few in that section that I read, I just hated them. I still wasn't very invested in the plot, where there was like this invisible monster being mind controlled, various secrets that need uncovered by our protagonist before too long. And she's determined to uncover these, finding myself to care about any of these secrets. I think mostly the root of that was that it didn't tie in very well with our protagonist's character arc and goals. Her goal is to just survive on this ship and like impress the captain enough that she needs a good recommendation for her next job from him. And then she's suddenly like, wow, I gotta uncover this mystery puzzle. And I'm like, girl, no you don't. In fact, if you're trying to uncover all these secrets that your captain is keeping from you, that's probably just counter to your goals. And this would be a really cool moment if this caused like internal conflict in our protagonist, where she was like knowing that this was hurting her chances of getting a recommendation, but doing it anyway, and like really torn about that, but I just wasn't feeling it. So I think I'm gonna give Fortune's Pawn 2 stars, because it was still, you know, it was okay. Maybe in a different circumstance, in a different life, where I hadn't started the audiobook first, I probably would have finished it and given it 3 stars, would be my guess. But just that audiobook was so bad, the narrator was so annoying. So, 2 stars it is. Done, and moving on to my next sci-fi romance.
Hello! I have finished a new sci-fi romance novel. This one's called Polaris Rising. Let me tell you about the sci-fi plot first. So we are following a space princess named 𝐂𝐸𝐻. 2 years before the book starts, she was being pushed into an arranged marriage that she didn't want, so she ran away from home. And ever since then, she's been on the run as her father has been trying to track her down to get her into this political marriage. At the beginning of the book, things have finally caught up to 𝐂𝐸𝐻 as she gets captured by these bounty hunters. And she knows that now she's getting brought back to her father and she needs to get out. As she's fighting free of these bounty hunters and going on the run some more, she discovers various larger political plots that even though she's trying to distance herself from her family, she still cares about the family businesses, and she still cares about her siblings, so she wants to get involved in order to protect her family from this war that's looming and coming for them. Now, what did I think of this sci-fi plot? It was pretty okay. Definitely our protagonist was compelling and strong. She always had a plan, was always working towards something, and was a joy to follow. I also feel like the looming war plot and all of that stuff that was going on was also very well done. Like, I believed that these discoveries she was making were going to change the war. I believed that she cared about it, and everything definitely felt important and weighty with stakes. Now, if I have any complaints about the sci-fi plot of this book, it's that it seems to spoon feed us a little too much. The clues are often a little too obvious, and the world building honestly a little too simplistic for my taste. I think the average sci-fromance reader appreciates that in their books. Now, the romance. When 𝐂𝐸𝐻 gets captured in that first bounty hunter ship, there's another prisoner that these bounty hunters have recently caught, and this is Marcus Locke, the most wanted man in the galaxy. He's wanted for many murders. And he definitely gives off those vibes. I loved their dynamic at the beginning where they're both trying to escape and they're working together through this escape. But 𝐂𝐸𝐻 does not trust Locke because he's like a murderer and the most dangerous man in the galaxy. And for good reason, because he doesn't display a lot of super trustworthy qualities for a lot of this book. But as they escape the bounty hunters and work together through all the other political shenanigans, they bond and form a relationship. Now, the romance, though the setup was very good, the execution was not. This romance is like 100% lust. Like, they have so many physically intimate scenes so quick. And it was never counterbalanced by any like emotionally intimate love scenes. Like, there were so many paragraphs of 𝐂𝐸𝐻 admiring Locke's body and how incredibly hot this guy is, but there were never any paragraphs of her like admiring his personality or opening up to him, or him really opening up to her. They talk a little bit about Locke's tragic backstory, but that's it. So by the end of the book, when they're like, I want to be with you forever and I'd give up anything for you, I didn't believe it, because it just felt like, hey, these people had a one-night stand. And now they're obsessed with each other, apparently, you know? It didn't actually feel like a developing relationship. It just felt like people who were acquaintances with benefits. I gave Polaris Rising 3 stars. I have read more recent books by this author, Jessie Mihalik, which were much better, and that's why I picked up this one from her, because I was hoping for that. But I think, and I also feel like the sci-fi plots are stronger in her more recent books. So, we'll pick up future Jessie Mihalik books, but I don't think I'm going to be exploring her backlog. And now here's hoping that the next book of this video is going to be our 5 stars. Welcome to the Interlude, where I'm excited to explain what exactly is sci-fromance and why is it my favorite genre. Also, you might be wondering about the term sci-fromance itself. It's because I feel like the genre needs a fun name like romantasy. Originally, I was calling it romancify, and then I came up with sci-fromance, which I like a little better, so I decided to put it to a poll on my community tab to see what other people liked better. And while romancify won, I think I'm just gonna make an executive decision that because it's close, we can call it sci-fromance instead. Because romancify, as some people have pointed out to me, it's a little confusing because it sounds more like a verb, like you're making something romancy, romancifying something. But sci-fromance is easier to understand. It's a mashup of sci-fi and romance. So for clarity, we're calling it sci-fromance. Got it? Got it. So sci-fromance simply is a mashup of the genres of sci-fi and romance. Some of the things that I love about the sci-fi genre are like this. One of the cores of the sci-fi genre is it's often exploring themes and speculative ideas. Like sci-fi books are often about something. It's about what if humanity lived like this? What if? And I love how it's really rigorously exploring interesting ideas. I also just love how sci-fi is sciencey and nerdy. Like, I'm a science geek and I love it when my books are too. It brings me great joy. And also, sci-fis often have intriguing plots. Like, not always. Some sci-fi is the complete slogs. But a lot of them, you get fun space battles, you get interesting ideas being tied in with high-stakes moments. So these are all the pluses of sci-fi. But I think the genre and its tropes have one major weakness, which is that they lack character focus. Now, there are some awesome character-focused sci-fi books out there, and those are my favorite ones. But the typical sci-fi book isn't super character-focused. That's just how the genre is built. It's more focused on the themes and the ideas than the characters and their relationships with each other. Now, let's talk about the romance side of things. The biggest strength of romances is that they're like always character and relationship focused, something that I love. I also love that romances tend to be cute and have a happy ending, which just makes me happy. I love it. But one of the big negatives is that romances are often lacking an intriguing plot because they're so focused on the character and relationship that they miss having anything else to keep you hooked. They miss having real stakes. And one of the other cons of romance books is that they sometimes have underdeveloped themes and they're missing some of that meat that I'm looking for in my books, but they're really exploring ideas. Now, these are just general. Obviously, there's exceptions. But the great thing, and in my opinion, the best thing about the genre of sci-fromance is that there are books with all of these strengths and none of these weaknesses. That a good sci-fromance book will have good themes and speculative ideas, be sciencey and nerdy, have an intriguing plot, character and relationship focus, and be cute and have a happy ending. Like, it's a recipe for my ideal book. As we've seen in this video so far, not every sci-fromance actually has all of these. But I love the potential of this genre. And so many of my favorite books are in this union. In this marriage of sci-fi and romance, and it's because of that that I keep searching for the next good one. But even though so far this video isn't going great, I still hope and believe that we are going to find a 5-star any book now because the recipe for sci-fromance is so awesome and just exactly what I'm looking for in a novel. So wish me luck. Hopefully this video doesn't last that long. So I've read another sci-fromance book, and let's just say I thought this video would be shorter. But it's looking like this video might be actually really long, and I'm starting to get that. So the latest book that I've read is called The Fates Divide. This is a sequel to a book that I read in like 2016, and I remember loving that book. Like, I binged that book in a day. And I barely remembered anything about it, but I remembered we had a girl and she was part of this kind of evil royal family and she had the magical ability to cause pain in anyone she touched. And then the guy is brought in and his magical power is that magic powers don't work on him so that she can actually touch him. And then they have a romance. And then there's also some sort of political rebellion happening. Anyway, I read it so many years ago. I don't know. So this is the sequel of the fallout of that political rebellion and stuff that they start happening, and I was expecting this book to have more romance in it, because the first one had so much. This book, not so much. The Fates Divide, book 2, was also trying to start this new romance, where we have the sister of the hero of the first book, and she has a love interest who's like a diplomat lady. And I think we were supposed to ship them, but I really didn't. Because this new heroine's magic power is that she can emotionally manipulate people. And then her entire relationship with this love interest of hers is founded on only manipulation. All they have is lies and emotional manipulation. And I'm like, I'm supposed to ship this? I'm supposed to cheer when they're kissing? No. And I know that sounds pretty fantasy, but most of the plot is very like space politics. There's one world versus the other world, and we have to go talk to the galactic councils and stuff. But there's also a fair number of fantasy elements mixed in, like there's lots of prophecies and lots of people have magic powers. The thing is, there are so many scenes in this book that after I read the scene, I'd be like, wow, that was a good scene. Like I could feel the emotions and the characters and everything. It's just the larger plot of where all those scenes are going is super boring. And I kept sticking with it. I kept thinking, no, I'm sure that the plot is just gonna start happening again. And then the plot actually started happening again, and I was still so bored. Like, exciting things were happening, people were dying, confrontations were happening, and I still didn't care. So I DNF'd this book at 58%. And I am giving The Fates Divide 2 stars. So if we're looking at like the 4 books I've read so far for this video, here's like our star rating distribution of them. 2 3 stars and 2 2 stars, and like, this is unacceptable. This is statistically my favorite genre where I'm most likely to find a 5 star, and all we have is duds. I guess I should just be grateful that there hasn't been a 1 star. Now I gotta like knock on some wood because of course that's what I'm gonna pick up next, isn't it? Wish me luck on my next book, because we are hoping here for a 5 star. Book number 5 of this video is The Star Nomad. And I gotta say, this is my favorite book of the video so far. So we are on a very good trend here. But I think no matter what my rating on this one is, I still can't call the video over because it didn't end up being a sci-fromance. Now, the way that I'm finding these books is I'm scouring the internet for sci-fromance recommendations, for romantic sci-fi, for whatever I can get my hands on. I'm reading blurbs, I'm searching because it's not that easy to find. I wish someone would make an awesome recommendation video, which I will probably be the one to make one of these weeks. The Star Nomad is such a solid sci-fi, and I'm so excited to read the sequel, but it didn't actually contain any romance. I do think that the next books in the series are going to contain romance because there was a nice little flirtationship beginning between 2 of the characters, which I am so shipping and obsessed with already. But it didn't actually blossom into any sort of romance in this book. So very much all the way on our sci-fi meter. Let's talk about the plot of this one. Star Nomad takes place in a galaxy where the evil empire has just fallen, being overthrown by the rebellion. And now the rebellion can't control everyone, so everything's devolving into lawless pirate land. And our protagonist is a woman who was a starship fighter in the rebellion. And now she's recovered from her war wounds and she was kind of abandoned on this nowhere planet. And she really wants to get back to her daughter who she hasn't seen since like the beginning of the war and like she really cares for. So her and her engineering mechanic friend find a junkyard ship, fix it up, and get off the planet. The problem is that the ship has a very powerful cyborg man already living on it, and he does not want to be relocated, but he would take a ride off the planet. So him and they take on a few paying passengers while they're at it, and this whole bundle of people go out into the galaxy on a adventure where they do run into quite a lot of pirates. And one of the things that I loved about this book is the dynamic between our protagonist, who's very pro-rebellion, and this cyborg man, who's very pro-empire, and kind of salty that it was overthrown, and not liking the way that things have devolved since then. And the discussions between them about their ideologies and politics, and over the course of the book, as they get into all these dangerous situations together and slowly become more allies and friends, and find common ground, like chef's kiss. And yes, they're the ones with the flirtationship, and I am so excited for their romance, but it didn't happen in this book. So, on to the sequels we will go, which may or may not end up being in this video, depending on if I find a 5 star before I make it around to them. The rest of the cast is also stellar, just like these 2 and their relationship was like S tier, you know? I'm going to give Star Nomad 4 stars, which means this is now the star distribution for this video, and I am very glad that we have a 4 star now. Like anything over 3 stars, I will take it. So let's see what book number 6 has in store for us. I finished another Sci-fromance book, and it is The Blighted Stars. And this one, the plot is fantastic. So we are following him and her, and he is Tarquin, and he is the heir to this huge intergalactic mining dynasty, super rich, super powerful, and he is super into geology, real nerd, guys. And then her is Naira, a woman who used to be a security guard for his family until she discovered that his family is wrecking the planets that they mine on, so she became an eco-terrorist, and her whole goal in life is to take them down. So then they've got a spaceship going to the new mining site. He is very excited to use his geology degrees and really refine this process, and she has disguised herself as his current bodyguard. Because a big part of the sci-fi world building here is that humanity has perfected the 3D printed person. So to travel the galaxy, instead of actually traveling the galaxy, you just send a spaceship out with a bunch of human 3D printers and then you get yourself printed over there. Which has fascinating implications for the way that they see bodies, as everything is a little bit more disposable. And there's a lot of plot points in this book where they have to make sure that their mind is backed up to the cloud so that next time they get printed out, they remember this incarnation. So she has gotten her mind printed into his current bodyguard's body. And then the spaceship that they're on crash lands. So the mining will not be going as planned. Now it is a survival adventure. And then the romance is, of course, between these two as they get to know each other and realize that they actually could be on the same team here. So this book is very sci-fi check. It is much less on the romance side than I was expecting from a premise like that. It belongs way over there on the sci-fi end of the scale, which I totally wasn't expecting from the blurb on the back of the book, which seems so this is gonna be a romance novel. So I was a little disappointed there, honestly. Because thinking about it like this, if you took out the romance plot from this book, would it change? And there is a romance plot to take out, but not much would change. And I think this is actually what bothered me for most of the book and what made the romance not land for me. Though the characters are in forced proximity like the entire book, it is textbook enemies to lovers, it's done flawlessly, I never feel like the characters really wanted a romance from each other, or in general. Sure, they were admiring each other, but it never felt like they wanted each other past okay, we need a survival buddy in order just to live through this planet. Or I need a buddy in order to take down bad mining practices. But it wasn't I need a romantic partner to cuddle me at night because I'm so lonely. It very much had the feeling that both of these characters could just take or leave this romance. And if you took out the romance from this book, though some scenes would be gone, none of their decision points would actually change because they were never making decisions motivated by the romance. They were just making decisions motivated by, oh no, we're in a survival situation and we need to work together here. And I care about your survival because I care about you. But not necessarily in a romantic sense, but just because they've been bonding through this apocalyptic situation. Does that make sense? And near the end of the book, it finally started exploring a little bit more of what this romance means to them, but I felt too little too late. I'll probably read the sequel because it is a solid sci-fi with a romance subplot, but the romance subplot I wouldn't call solid because despite their good banter, despite them working together well, despite them obviously admiring each other, it never sold me on why they wanted each other. And the sci-fi plot of this book does get quite tricky, interesting, good, and kind of horrific. I gave The Blighted Stars 3 stars. For book number 7, yes, 7, I read The Soulmate Equation, and I know what you're thinking, isn't that like a contemporary romance? That's not sci-fi, and yeah, kind of. Let me explain. Through all of my searches for Sci-fromance books, this one kept coming up, and I kept being like, no, that's set in our normal world. That doesn't count as sci-fi, it doesn't count. But guys, I'm getting desperate, and it sounds really good, so I read it. And I was thinking the past 2 books have been more sci-fi and very little romance, so maybe let's lean the other way and go romance with very little sci-fi. So here is the sci-fi of this book. There's a dating app called DNA Duo, where you submit your DNA and then they give you matches of people who work biologically with you. They've done all the math and they've done all the science looking at a bunch of successful couples, and they've identified DNA markers that can predict couple success. Here is also some of the science in this book. Our heroine, our protagonist, is a statistician, and she is always thinking in terms of numbers. And our hero is a genetics guy. So the romance of it is that he is like the CEO of this company. It is his baby, he is the head scientist, and he is so passionate about his work. But he never really expected to get matched with someone, and neither did she when she signed up for the service on a whim. And the company is still in beta testing, and they plan to go fully public in a few months. And their match is incredibly high, like 98% compatible, the highest the company's ever had. And so the company wants to take advantage of this wonderful PR moment. Their CEO has an incredibly high match. They need him out in the public, looking all lovey-dovey with his match to prove, it's working. So they offer to pay the heroine to get to know him, to pretend to be his girlfriend for a few months as they get ready to launch their product. And she agrees, and then begins a kind of fake dating situation where they are both doing this for the publicity, for the money, for the good of this company. But they're also both aware that they did actually match really well, and there could be something actually here. But then they're never quite sure if the other one is behaving all lovey-dovey because they're actually feeling that way, or because they're doing it for the cameras. So thinking about previous book, I said it didn't count as sci-fi romance because there wasn't much romance, and if you took out what there was, it wouldn't change the plot at all. So thinking about this book, does it count as a sci-fromance? Because if you took out the science, this book would not be the same. And not just the premise of the DNA matchup. Like you could take out that the company is matching people via DNA and just make it like a standard personality test, and it wouldn't change the plot all that much, except there's a whole lot of numbers in this book, and there's a whole lot of science. One of the big turning points of this book comes because our heroine makes a breakthrough after she's done a bunch of number crunching. There's a whole chapter of just number crunching. And harkening back to what else makes sci-fi kind of feeling like sci-fi is a lot of the philosophical discussions and what if this was the situation, how would people react? And this book does have those feelings. And that's such a big propulsor of the plot, is exploring this idea. And so, even though this book doesn't follow any sci-fi tropes, I do think I'd call it a sci-fromance because the core of the feelings of sci-fi, where it's about exploring the speculative science and what those ideas do to society and people, and where it's also about really relishing science and celebrating it and having our two characters actually be scientists and mathematicians and having that be a big part of both their personality and how they interact with the plot. So this book gets to stay a sci-fromance, and honestly I would even put it closer to sci-fi than Polaris Rising. Because even though Polaris Rising takes place on planets and spaceships and in this alternate universe, it didn't really have that much sci-fi feelings outside of those tropes. And this book, The Soulmate Equation, even though it doesn't actually play with the standard sci-fi tropes, it feels much more like sci-fi. And I'm so glad I can count this as sci-fromance because this video is over. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. It was so good. I loved the romance and the angst of them trying to form a genuine connection in the midst of all of this publicity stunts. I loved the sciencey exploration of what does this matchmaking based on DNA really mean in our relationship and what are the consequences of that. I loved that our heroine was a single mom and we got to see a lot of her interacting with her kid, and the kid was a big part of the book. I loved all of our fun side characters. And I loved that while this book did get a little spicy lusty sometimes, it was always secondary to the emotional connection that these characters were building. And I would definitely recommend this book to people who are just contemporary romance lovers, but also people who are looking for more sci-fi in their books, because it really does balance both. I loved how this book let its characters be unashamedly geeky, going full technobabble into the statistician world. Yes! This book was cute and lovely and smart, and I gave it 5 stars. Which leaves our star distribution for this video looking like this, which is a far cry from what it was before this video for Sci-fromance, which was this, and combined we've got this. So I definitely didn't expect this to take me 7 books, but I am glad that I read all of them. I feel like I've definitely explored more of the genre of sci-fromance, and it's given me some authors to look into more. I learned a lot about the genre of sci-fromance. I learned that the most popular things in the genre right now are alien erotica, which isn't what I'm looking for, but is definitely what I found a lot while searching for these books. I also found that there seems to be a lot more in the indie published space than there is in the contemporary published space, that publishing hasn't quite caught up to this future trend which I'm predicting, and that though there are duds, like in every genre, when I find a good one, it really is my favorite type of book. And I think you'll like watching this video next.